beg some indulgence because I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes. I'll try to get through it all. I want to make sure nothing is left out. First, I may not get a chance to do that, I want to thank all the staff that unfortunately had to deal with me for the past year. Edward Castillo, Robin Levine, Aisha Wright, Robert Corngate, of course, Romo Martinez, and the ones that I worked with the most, Lionel Francois, Regina Pareda, Salvador Arona, Carmine Guega, Pascal Bernard, and the one who had the unfortunate privilege of being with me the most, Margaret Nelson. I really thank you guys for putting up with me and putting up with this process, this most important process. Gun violence is killing our children, our sons, and our daughters, and we want to step up to the plate, and I think we have, and provide concrete actions that we can take to tackle this problem. Tiny coffins, to me, they're on the descriptions. I remember seeing the coffin of Lloyd Morgan Jr., who was 4 years old in Harlem, and I remember asking the question, why do they even make coffins that small? And now I know a town in Newtown has to do about 20 of those. And it's just, there's no words to say about that. I thank the task force members for their hard work in the process. The task force brought together people who are in the front lines in their communities, trying to stem the tide of violence and bring comfort to mothers and fathers when they lose their loved ones. And I try to call it a seat. And I want to really thank the Speaker of the City Council for stepping up and doing this task force. And now Obama's copying, putting together a task force. But over a year ago, many of the people behind me have been asking something like this. Not only did she step up and say we're going to do it, there was only one initiative that was funded in the City Council this year, and that was the Gun Violence Initiative to the tune of $4.2 million. So I want to say thank you. And I want to give
thank you.
And of course, thank Council Member Cabrera, the co-chair, and all of my colleagues who have been working on this issue. I know Council Member Idanis Rodriguez had a press conference yesterday on a similar issue. We came up with many recommendations which are contained in this report. I won't go through them all. I will focus on main recommendations. Then my colleague Fernanda Cabrera will focus on some other things, including our legislative recommendations to help reduce the supply of illegal guns, dangerous guns in our communities. Our work focused on strategies that the Council can implement that will lead to measurable reductions to shooting incidences. Through our research, we decided the best strategy would be to focus our efforts on communities and individuals in those communities that are disproportionately affected by gun violence. By targeting efforts and resources there, we could have the most impact. I also want to thank some of the people who came to meet with us, including Dietrich Epps. I tried to use a RVA model, which I'm fond of, to help us through some of this, and I want to thank her. We also learned that using a public health approach is showing some promised results. Violence could be looked at as a disease that spreads from one person to another. Only in this case, one violent incident leads to retaliatory incidences, so focus on breaking that cycle. The U.S. Surgeon General, the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control have all decided that this kind of violence is a priority health issue. I also have a resolution to the same for New York City. Also, using public health type messaging to change people's behavior and norms, just like we were doing for anti-smoking, anti-obesity efforts, has been a promising strategy. So the task force developed a crisis response system, which would provide a comprehensive response to gun violence that would provide both immediate support when violence happens, but also engage the community and government in any ongoing way to reduce and de-escalate future incidences through prevention and education. We recommended this pilot be implemented first in the 5 target precincts that were used off of the data that we had almost a year ago, and each of the 5 boroughs that had the most shooting incidences. The 48th in South Bronx, the 32nd in Harlem, the 113th in Jamaica, the 120th in North Shore of Staten Island, the 70th in East New York Brooklyn.
75th.
We looked at models around the world and found that the Chicago ceasefire, now called Cure Violence, showed promising results. In fact, we had some pilots already here funded by the Governor's Office and the City and the Department of Justice. The model focuses on a small target geographic area of high shootings, and through the work of community staff, credible messengers who can build relationships with community members, identifies and reaches out to those most likely to be at risk of engaging in gun violence. Through those relationships, they help stop shootings before they happen and help to de-escalate incidences or retaliatory shootings. Our recommendation included making sure each of our pilot areas would have or begin to develop a cure violence program. But our task force said that they couldn't stop there. In order for this model to really work, we needed to make sure the services and supports who are there for cure violence programs to draw on to help these at-risk youth and their families. So the task force recommended a whole package of programming to be targeted in these areas. The first one, which is very apropos now, community and professional mental health services. And I just need to pause and say I'm glad that we're having this discussion now. Obviously what happened in Newtown is indescribable. But it's important because I remember shootings in schools, neighborhoods where I live, like Thomas Jefferson High School, many years ago. And many things that are in here, including mental health, are things that we have proposed. One of the things that frustrated me is when I saw someone shoot a congressman, I saw someone shoot up a movie theater, I saw someone shoot up an elementary school. No one was called an animal, no one was called a savage. There were discussions about the mental health status, and there were discussions about what could have been done to intervene in that young person's life that could have stopped that. These are things that we have been saying for years about inner-city violence. For some reason it was falling on deaf ears, and people were saying we were trying to get away from personal responsibility. And we were doing quite the opposite. We knew the lock-them-up strategies would not work. What they did when the shootings happened here, they put more metal detectors, they did other things, but they never got to the root of it. So I'm glad we're having these discussions now. They're important, but everybody needs them. I remember we met with a bunch of young people, and one of those young people described, remembering when he was young, seeing a body thrown off the roof. Never got any therapy before. And people are dealing with issues of cycles of poverty, cycles of destruction, and they're getting no therapy. It's a problem. And one anecdote, as I was talking about this, I remembered something. My mother's a genius. Growing up, she was pretty annoying, but that helped. And one of the things that I remember she did when my father left and I started acting up, she put me in therapy. She had me speak to someone. It didn't work completely, but I have to say, who knows what would have happened?
The staff will be giving your mother a ring later, Jumaane.
But who knows what would have happened if she didn't do that? Who knows if she didn't take the time to say there's something going on and he needs help, if she didn't do that. So we need to provide those services to young people, and our communities need to be receptive to those services as well. School-based conflict mediation services, job training and job placement services, legal services. This is about flooding these communities with resources like we did a century ago for immigrant communities when they was dealing with the same type of violence. I'm pleased that even before this report was released, we were able to work with the speaker, as I mentioned, and my colleagues, and in particular the Finance Chair, Dominic Reckett, to fund this initiative with over $4 million in this current year budget. So we can start on this important year work. And we look forward to seeing the results of this program over time as it gets up and running in these communities. There are other recommendations that we look forward to implementing that are in early stages, but are also important. For example, the task force believes a public messaging campaign on this issue is a crucial component to our efforts to reduce gun violence. We have set aside funding in the council initiatives toward this effort. This all covers the demand side of the gun violence. We thought there were two issues, demand side and supply side. My colleagues are going to talk about the supply side, and the mayor, we don't agree on everything, but he's been doing a great job on the federal level to try to deal with the supply side of guns. But on a local level, we have a lot more work to get to consensus, but we have to focus on the demand side of these issues. The NRA insulted America today as we attempt to work together for the first time in over a decade to pass meaningful gun reform. And this is just for me. The NRA are idiots. They are making asinine comments that are disrespecting people who are dying. And the Republicans, I'm going to say, didn't listen to what America wanted, and they lost everything. I'm hoping they listen now because the NRA is on the wrong track. America does not want to answer this with armed, voluntary guards. They don't want to answer fire with fire, and we know what is needed, and it's not more guns. That is not the trajectory we want to take. Mayor should be commended for his approach. Also, I want to mention an incarceration issue as evidenced by new low numbers. I want to mention that because the same approach we're taking here, intervention, programs, juvenile justice, the ABLE program, making sure people have education when they're in jail, those are the same intervention programs and the same mentality that we need when it comes to gun violence. And we know that the lock-them-up strategy by itself is not going to work. So our work is not done by any means, but this report we issued today provides our recommendation for the council and the city on how we can all move forward with a corrective plan. We look forward to working with the speaker and my colleagues on this very important issue. I thank you again for all the work, and thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you very much.